Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Operation Gladio Meets Secret Societies with our guest star, War Hamster Brady.
Howdy. We're getting ready to hunker down. We're going to get hit by some very nasty weather this weekend. It's going to be below freezing and over 18 inches of snow coming. So
it's supposed to be 80 on Sunday.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead, since you're wearing your Michigan, and say, go Hoosiers.
We're not going to get into football today. I'm not. I'm stuck here in New England, and of course I'm surrounded by Patriots fans, and they're all begging me to go out and watch the game with them on Sunday. Well, you don't understand. I cannot physically am unable to root for the New England Patriots. I'm just not. There were so many masshole friends of mine in San Diego that I used to go watch football with, and they've just been giving me grief for 25 years. I mean, it's physically impossible to root for that team for me. So, well, we got a lot to go over today. Some really good stuff, and I'm hoping we can go a little bit longer than usual, if that's going to work on your calendar.
It will work.
Okay. I usually have about 6 pages of notes, and today I've got about 9, just to give you an example. Okay. So be forewarned. Shall we jump in?
Yes, let's do.
Okay. Well, we are going through the secret society at Yale University known as Scroll and Key, kind of like the little brother of Skull and Bones, but maybe not so little. Once again, the patterns we see over and over again are these people come from connected families. They go to the same grooming schools. They go into Yale University, get tapped on the shoulder, join a secret society, and all of a sudden they spend the rest of their lives just being in all the choke point and decision-making positions throughout industry, politics, the legal system, espionage especially, the military. And what we're really describing is a pattern of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and these people really run the world. Fair enough?
Well, they're the Praetorian Guard for the people who run the world.
Yeah, they would be adjacent. Sometimes the people that actually run the world, you don't know their names.
Correct.
Even though all roads lead to Rockefellers. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started. There we go. Okay, when we left off last week, by the way, it's good to be back on a regular routine.
Yes.
We're going through the Scroll and Key alumni in chronological order from the 1930s, and the last gentleman we did was a J. Peter Grace from the W.R. Grace Company, and he was a peach.
Yes.
Well, moving on.
Evil way.
This might be one of my favorite guys we ever did, and it's not a household name. Have you heard of Peter Hoyt-Dominick?
No. Okay.
Well, you will. That will change because he's a fun story. And normally, I go over these. I started Wikipedia, and I'll jump in to see if anything jumps off the page at me, whether they were even worth mentioning. And this guy had some of the patterns, but wasn't necessarily a household. A guy that you really would want to focus on for this. But it gets better when you dig deeper. So there's more to life than Wikipedia. All right, so this is Peter Hoyt-Dominick, Scroll and Key, class of 1937. He was born in Stamford, Connecticut. So there's in 1915 from an establishment family. Those who don't know, Stamford is one of those little enclaves of very old money. It's where UBS happens to have its world's biggest trading desk for derivatives.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I had a chance to visit it when I worked for them. It's a very impressive place. All right, his uncle was a guy by the name of Howard Alexander Smith, and he was a Republican U.S. Senator from New Jersey from 1944 to 1959.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the years are interesting because we know what was going on right then. He wasn't all that important. He was a Columbia grad. In World War I, he had worked for the U.S. Food Administration under Hoover, a Republican who Woodrow Wilson had appointed to run that part of the war effort. to make it seem bipartisan. But the one thing that his uncle, Howard Alexander Smith, was known for was being a co-author of the Smith-Mundt Act.
Ooh.
And for our listeners, Colonel, what is the Smith-Mundt Act and why do we care about it?
Go ahead and tell them.
It basically banned government propaganda. And then it got kind of repealed under Obama. And that is why the media is allowed to lie to us so much.
Which they did anyway. They didn't pay any attention to that. I mean, that all came out in the 70s.
Yeah, there haven't been a whole lot of prosecutions under the Smith-Mundt Act, but it's gotten more blatant. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, so on the surface, anybody who writes the Smith-Mundt Act, I'm going to say he's actually a good politician. So this is not good versus evil necessarily. Peter Hoyt Dominic, his father was part of a well-established New York investment banking family. What's the pattern with investment bankers? Start with the Dulles brothers. Pretty much that's where it goes. All right, so Peter, he went to high school at a place called the St. Mark's School. Yes, that's one of the grooming schools, and it's got some very interesting alumni, and I think it's worth it for us to go through them. I'll go pretty quick, though. Here's one you know, Samuel A. Adams. He was a CIA official who exposed the bad Vietnam intel that the Defense Department was getting. Next one jumped off the page at me, a guy by the name of Ben Bradlee.
Oh my
Ben
gosh.
Bradlee was the editor of the Washington Post during the Watergate scandal.
Yep.
And he's the editor that they had to get permission for before they could publish. We're talking about Woodward and Bernstein, of course. Nicholas F. Brady, the Treasury Secretary under George H.W. Bush. That's interesting.
Yep.
The administration did some interesting things with the Treasury, would you not say?
Very interesting.
Okay. I got a guy by the name of Wayne Chatfield Taylor, who, of course, was once the president of the Export-Import Bank, which we featured a long time ago.
Yes.
Big part of international trade. We had Christopher Forbes. This is all one high school people. Christopher Forbes, who, of course, is the vice chair of Forbes Incorporated, that family. Guy by the name of C. Boyden Gray, who was the White House counsel to George H.W. Bush. Wait a minute. Two guys, one high school, in the cabinet of a Skull and Bones alumni.
Yep.
Who was also former head of the CIA.
Yep.
All right, see, this is the boring stuff on today's, but it still just fits every, just checking every box. All right, we had, hang on, let me get that out of there. We had, Prince Hashim Al Hussein of the, son of the King of Jordan. Where else do we go here? Oh, William A. Knowlton, who is do you know him?
I know who he is.
Yeah.
I don't know him.
I don't have anything scandalous about him. He was a 4-star general and the superintendent of West Point.
Yeah, which is, where I get the word, the name West Point Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured that one. Okay, here's a fun one. If anybody was following us on Twitter yesterday, Dr. Deprogram and I were discussing the next one. George Putnam III, who is a trustee of Putnam Investments. The Putnam Investments, I'll get to that in a second. I'll tell about the scandal in a second. This is a big mutual fund firm founded by his grandfather, George I. He started the George Putnam Fund. It was one of the very first successful open-end mutual funds, and one of the biggest for a long time. And as Dr. Deprogram mentioned, he actually married the sister of Harvey Bundy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Of the Bundy family. So now we know he's part of the Boston Brahmins, right?
Yep.
Um, his great uncle, George III, was a guy by the name of Abbott Lawrence Lowell, who was the Harvard president from 1909 to 1933.
Wow.
Yeah, if you follow our work, Dr. DeProgram's work, and a few other people, the money behind these Ivy League schools, that's where you look to find, that's the power behind the throne. When you
Yep.
get people that run Harvard University or Yale or Columbia, yeah, kind of a big deal. The middle guy, George Jr., he's the fun one. He was a Harvard MBA, joined Putnam Investments in 1951, then would later become the treasurer of Harvard and the founding chairman of the Harvard Management Company.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit of a mic drop there, huh?
Yeah.
George III would go to Harvard, Harvard Law, and Harvard Business School, and then he would run the company as well. Now, I know the Putnam family really well, because back when I was doing investments, they were one of the bigger mutual fund companies, and their wholesaler would come by and they'd try to talk you into using their funds. They'd try to take you out to golf and dinner, and they had unlimited expense accounts. And, if you had any ethics, you would only go play golf or whatever with somebody who you're already doing business with. Otherwise, it's a quid pro quo. That's the way the business works. Same thing that works with big pharma sales when they go to doctors. And they pay you to use their product. It's not good. Well, Putnam's in 1998 they do some kind of a merger with a Japanese firm, and the management changes. The .com happens in 2000, and Putnam decided their funds have been lagging behind in the 90s. So they decided to get super aggressive and super concentrated in the biggest tech companies, which all crashed and burned starting in March of 2000. And the George Putnam Fund, which is once one of the biggest mutual fund companies in the world, bled about $2 billion of their assets under management.
Wow.
And it took them a decade to restore their reputation, and some advisors still won't even let them in the front door. So that's the Putnam family. I could go a lot deeper, but we'll leave that one for Dr. DeProgram because she will go deeper. But the Harvard Management Company is the real key there.
Yeah.
All right. The rest of this high school. We had a Joseph Pulitzer III and a Ralph Pulitzer. How about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and two other Roosevelts? And, of course, two Vanderbilts, all at this school where Peter Dominic goes.
Wow.
So he's rubbing elbows, right?
Big time.
Graduates Yale Law in 1940 and gets hired at a firm. Tell me if you've heard of them. Carter, Ledyard, and Milburn.
They provided a lot of CIA people.
We're going to get into that. We just call them CLM from now on. So CLM is a New York law firm founded in 1954. Some of their former partners include a Grenville Clark. I love this guy. He's the co-author of a book called World Peace Through World Law. Okay, so he's a globalist probably, right?
Yeah.
He wanted allocation of votes. This is what the book proposed. He wanted allocation of United Nations votes based on population of the country. So basically China and India would run the world. He wanted to replace the UN Security Council with an executive council that would contain China, India, USSR, and the United States. There would be no vetoes, and nobody else would really have a voice.
So it would function basically like the EU.
On a global scale, sure. And of course, my favorite is you want to create a world police force as the only military force permitted in the world. That's about as New World Order as it gets.
Yes.
One world government. This guy actually got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And oh, by the way, he is a member and board member of the Harvard Corporation.
Holy
Because
crap.
of course he is. Yeah, here's one. William Harding Jackson is one of their alumni of this law firm. This guy is from Tennessee, but he went to high school at St. Mark's. And you know William Harding Jackson. He was an investment banker who became the national security advisor under Eisenhower. What was going on under the NSA under Eisenhower?
The National Security Council, they were orchestrating Operation Gladio and going around overthrowing governments.
Yeah.
Out of the National Security Council.
Yeah, that's this guy, one of their lawyers. And he was the number one national security advisor. And of course, he was the deputy director of the CIA under Truman.
Which is when they created the CIA.
Exactly. My favorite, though, in 1956, he becomes the special assistant to Eisenhower for psychological warfare.
Yeah.
You want to know who had that job before him?
Who?
Nelson Rockefeller.
Oh, that's right. I did know that.
And just a side note, William Harding Jackson would also work at Cadwallader, Wickerham, and Shaft. Just checking the comments real quick. Anything interesting in there?
Not yet.
All right. Okay. Another alumni was, of course, Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself. And then we couldn't stop this list without talking about Frank Wisner. You want to give it 30 seconds on Frank Wisner, why he's mentionable?
Well, Frank Wisner, actually, I have the book right here, weirdly enough, called The Determined Spy, his entire life story. Obviously, he ran the Office of Policy Coordination under the State Department that folded into the CIA, that then became the operations branch that orchestrated all of the Operation Gladio style events, managed the program, covert operations for years and years in that position. Best friends with Allen Dulles, and kind of the heart or the springboard for the rest of the CIA nefarious overseas covert operations. He's the granddaddy of them.
You'd say he'd be on the Mount Rushmore of the spooks, right?
Yes.
I like that. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn off my notifications because I keep beeping. All right. So that's this one law firm, and we could go a lot deeper, but there's some connections there, and that's who this gentleman goes to work for, Dominic. Not done with the law firm though, because CLM was recently caught up in scandals. They represented the Russians at Alpha Bank versus Orbis Business Intel, the lawsuits having to do with the Steele dossier. They were also implicated and did representing in the 1MDB scandal, where the $4.5 billion were embezzled from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund. They weren't directly implicated, but they were certainly involved. I want to do a little more on this law firm because they're worth it. So let me see if I can find this. All right, can we share that screen?
Yeah, and that's kind of the heart of what we're doing, is the history that we talk about on this show and on my show comes forward to today and is very, very relevant in the behind the scenes operators, because they don't change their stripes.
No, and it's the same. That's why it's so easy for us to see it now, because it's the same patterns and it's the same families.
Yes.
All the same connections. I had some fun on the CLM website, but some of the things they're involved in. Let's just start here with Asia Pacific. Building a strong foundation, basically helping international clients. We provide legal services to foreign clients entering the U.S. market. Okay. UK and Australia cross-border. So basically, if you're an international firm and you want to do business in America, these are your guys. Tax-exempt organizations, otherwise known as NGOs. They're counsel for them. Latin America cross-border specialists. Wow. Middle East and North Africa. IPOs, initial public offerings from Asia Pacific. So if every Chinese company that came over here and did an IPO in America, these guys might have had a finger in it. If they're an antitrust law, oh, here we go, art law. Why is that interesting?
Because the CIA loves money laundering through art.
There you go. That's probably enough on these guys. Well, maybe there's something else interesting. Turkey, trade secrets and restrictive covenants. I like the Turkey one. More cross-border. Environmental land use. God, these guys they got their fingers in a lot of stuff that has been corrupted.
Well, the environmental land it dovetails right into this guy that you're talking about, activity.
Yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back.
He cut his teeth at this law firm.
Yeah, and then made his connections.
And so the important part of that, for those of you, this is true of all of these people that are groomed through law school. They go into a law firm to get their marching orders before they then go into government to carry out that law firm and their client's agenda. So pay attention to this part.
Yeah, an awful lot of the global decisions are made in law firm boardrooms, and that's
because they represent the oligarchs.
Yes, and then they put their politicians in place to write the laws.
Yeah, and these people that are in these law firms become the politicians.
Yes. All right, so Mr. Peter Hoyt Dominic, World War II breaks out, and he joins the U.S. Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet.
Again.
Apparently, he had been an amateur pilot and loved flying. He rose to the rank of captain. And there was no mention in any of the bios I looked up of him having any intel or OSS connection in World War II, which is kind of surprising, right?
Yes.
Hold that thought. Mm-hmm. All right, so then he comes home, and he moves his practice to Denver, Colorado. His wife had a little bit of money, and they bought some property. By 1957, he enters politics as a Republican in the Colorado House of Representatives. Did that for 2 years and gets elected to the United States Congress, where he was there for a couple of years, and then he's elected to the U.S. Senate from Colorado as a Republican from 1963 to 1975. Now, as a Republican, these are some of the things that he was a big part of or voted for. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which is about to get addressed in the Supreme Court, the 1968 Civil Rights Act. And here's where it gets fun. The time when he's in office is right when the Rockefellers are putting all their NGOs to work and starting this whole global environmentalist movement. This guy's involved in the Wilderness Act of 1964, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, the Clean Air Act of 1970, the Clean Water Act of 1972, and the Endangered Species Act of 1973. These acts have been used to implement globalist schemes and give NGOs regulatory power, send U.S. taxpayer money to their paid protesters. All that stuff came through these acts. Because environmentalism is just the fake front to globalism.
Yes.
I find that just smoking gun. That's what this guy's pet causes are.
That's huge. And again, it goes back to his law firm and back to the oligarchs that they represent.
Exactly. Yeah, but the environment's to protect the little people. Mm-hmm. No, it's about natural resources. They think all the land is theirs.
Yeah.
This goes back to Teddy Roosevelt, or even further. But we'll get deeper in that when we do the Rockefellers and the foundations. He loses re-election in 1974 for the Senate, and a couple of reasons for that. He called Watergate an insignificant incident. And when he was working, there was a question he took about the United Nations food programs, and he's on tape quoting that Ugandans would rather eat people than the food. So he lost a little bit of support for that. It's funny. It's just kind of interesting when we're dealing with all the Somalia stuff right now.
Yeah.
And Uganda is actually one of the better run countries in Africa. Their people are more highly educated, and I know it's got a very large Christian population. All right, is that right? Do I have that right with Uganda? I have to check my notes on that.
Uganda,
right.
yeah.
So he gets it. I did get it correct. Okay, thank you. He's out of the Senate in 1975, but he gets appointed as, once again, the U.S. ambassador to Switzerland. We've talked about how all these guys from all these bloodlines become U.S. ambassadors because that's who carries out our foreign policy. But the U.S. ambassador also works directly with the State Department, which is the parent of the CIA.
Yes.
That's why they're trusted in that position. Switzerland's very important because of the Swiss banks with all the money laundering with the Vatican and everything like that. But you're also going to find a lot of the Swiss institutions are working side by side with the Rockefeller-based environmental policies. We're going to go really deep into the Swiss connection with the Rockefellers a little bit later. So this guy getting to be the ambassador of Switzerland means something. And here's where it gets fun. He was appointed the U.S. Okay, he left after about 6 months in Switzerland, and he would die in 1981. His children would then find detailed journals that he'd never shared that detailed his military service. This gets published in 2018 by his son, Alexander Dominic. And make sure I have this. Bear with me one second. Okay. In this book, it gives detailed chronicles of Dominic flying what's known as the hump. In quotes, the hump.
In Burma.
I knew you were going to say this one. Don't you jump ahead. I wasn't sure what the hump.
I'm just going to say it's in Burma.
Yeah. Well, I knew I'd heard of the hump before. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and this can get hilarious. I asked Grok, if you want to share that. What does flying the hump mean? Flying the hump.
The phone and asked me, but he wouldn't. Go ahead.
Oh, you're probably on a show. Flying the hump refers to one of the most dangerous and grueling air operations of World War II. It was a nickname Allied pilots gave to the perilous air route over the eastern Himalaya mountains, specifically the eastern end of the range, where they flew unarmed military transport aircraft from bases in India to airfields in China to resupply the Chinese nationalist force under Chiang Kai-shek and U.S. units fighting the Japanese in the China-Burma-India theater. Why did I leave that for last? Because what's he really doing, Colonel?
Flying drugs.
Uh-huh.
This is where you get Go ahead.
For who's he flying the drugs for?
Chiang Kai-shek, the biggest drug lord in that area. The CIA eventually, but it's OSS at the time.
Yeah, Grok doesn't know this. And there's even mention of, what's his name?
Claire Chenault?
No, what's the guy's name? Doolittle is actually mentioned.
Jimmy Doolittle?
Yeah.
So, but Claire Chenault was a major general during this time. And this gave birth to the China lobby and the whole birth of the CIA controlling the drug flow out of Southeast Asia. The flying the hump did. The flying tigers, eventually the DC-8s and all of that stuff are born out of this operation.
Yeah, and it ties into so much more. The military being involved in, flying drugs across the country. Yeah, how they used to, the pit stops in Cuba, why they were so mad when Cuba revolted. Oh, this ties into so many stories.
Yes.
The French connections there. That's this guy. So when I said hold that thought, I go, wait a minute. Because there's no way a guy with his connections wasn't involved in that, given what we know.
Yes.
Well, that's about it for Peter Dominic, but he's one of my favorites we've done just because of that last little bit.
Yep.
All right, let's go on to our next Scroll and Key alumni. Should be a household name. Sergeant Shriver.
Should
class
be.
Class of 1938. He's interesting. Now, before we get into him, we don't necessarily think all these people are good or evil. That's not I don't think that's how you define it. And you'll see some people that had good intentions at one point are just misguided, misdirected, or put in the wrong places. Well, Shriver was certainly put in a lot of the right places, and you can judge for yourself whether you think he'd be considered on the good white hat or black hat, but I think the world's far more nuanced than that. Fair enough?
Yep.
So if you go to Sergeant Shriver's Wikipedia page, they'll describe him as an American diplomat, politician, and activist. It's all accurate. He's a member of the Shriver family by birth and the Kennedy family through his marriage to Eunice Kennedy. So there's that connection. Shrivers are really well known. They've been around forever. Family's been in Maryland since at least 1721. Descendants fought in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and were at the Maryland Constitutional Convention of 1776. So this is blue blood, and they are very, very Catholic. Their home, the Union Mills Homestead, was home to 6 generations of Shrivers and is now a historical landmark. So being married to a Kennedy makes sense. He went to high school in Connecticut at the Canterbury School. It's not as big of a grooming school, but a couple of notable alumni was William Randolph Hearst III and a guy by the name of John F. Kennedy, who becomes friends with when they're freshmen together. That's the Canterbury School. Sargent played baseball, basketball, and football and was pretty good at them all, apparently. Then he gets to Yale. Of course, he gets tapped. 1938, and he would become, while he was there, a member of something called the America First Committee.
And that's very different than the America First movement today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's an important one.
Yep.
The organization is founded in 1940 by Yale law students who opposed getting into World War II. Who else opposed getting into World War II that we've talked about? Oh, I don't know. The people who pulled off the business plot and a bunch of skull and bones guys who would then go on to found the OSS. Just saying. Some pretty important people who would join it would be Gerald Ford, who you just talked about yesterday, I think.
Yep.
And, of course, future Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart. It was founded by a guy by the name of R. Douglas Stewarty Jr., who was the heir to the Quaker Oats Company. And the guy who headed it is fascinating. It's a guy by the name of Robert E. Wood. He's you know where we're going. He's a retired U.S. Army general, then would become the chairman of the Sears Roebuck Company. He was a West Point grad, happened to be stationed in the Philippines during the insurrection. What's going on in the Philippines?
He was stationed in the Philippines during our Operation Gladio activities in the Philippines, where we didn't want the indigenous people running the Philippines, and we made sure that they were basically slaughtered.
Pretty much. Okay, so he retires in 1915 and goes to work for a small family known as the DuPonts, where he works in the U.S., Venezuela, and Trinidad. You know how these multinational corporations love to have generals who don't know anything about commerce and business?
Because that's what they're there for.
Exactly. So he's one of the earliest examples of that I think we can find. World War I breaks out. He rejoins the army. Remember, this guy's leading Stay Out of War coalition.
Well, let me just caveat that. That America First movement was very fascist in nature. They were not necessarily America First. They didn't want to go in with the allies that would be fighting against Hitler and Mussolini, because they were very pro-Hitler and Mussolini, because they were doing business with Hitler and Mussolini.
It's 100% true. It's why I call this group of people the American fascists. You had the Brown Brothers Harriman, guys like Henry Ford. Henry Ford is a member of this group too, by the way.
Yes.
They're the ones who were paying for the rise of the Nazi Party. This is American money. They did not want to see that. They didn't want to see their investments bombed.
Yes.
Okay, so before World War II, we jumped ahead. He goes to work, retires again, joins Montgomery Ward, then Sears Roebuck, becomes a CEO, shifted the company to a retail outlet, was pretty successful. He'd go on to create a small little company called Allstate Insurance. Then he joins something called the National Economic Council, which is a conservative organization led by a guy by the name of Merwin K. Hart. This is the group that opposed FDR, wanted to lower taxes, supported Franco in Spain. They were considered anti-Semitic. They were always criticizing Keynesian economics as Marxist. They were correct on that. And a couple of, but you'd find some libertarians involved in this, like Rose Wilder Lane and Laura Ingalls Wilder were involved in that group, the National Economic Council. So that's why this whole fascist communist label thing is wrong, because without saying I'm pro-Hitler or anything like that, the fascists were right about a few things, and I much prefer their economic system than the Keynesian garbage that FDR gave us. So the world's more nuanced.
Correct.
Somehow that group, the National Economic Council, made it onto the famous Richard Nixon enemies list. Back to the America First Alliance, you had Henry Ford as an early member. Charles Lindbergh brought the anti-Semitic reputation because of some of his famous quotes. At its peak, in around 1938, before we got into the war, they had over 800,000 members and 450 chapters. They were about isolationism, bipartisanism, obviously the pro-fascist stuff labels. They were opposed to FDR's destroyers for bases and Lend-Lease bills. This is a pretty powerful coalition, right?
Yes.
It gets dissolved in 1941, 4 days after the Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah.
And that's when all of a sudden we need to start an OSS. And a lot of these same people had influence there.
Oh, yes, exactly.
All right, so that's the American First Council, and that's Shriver's part of that. Somehow, Shriver volunteers for the U.S. Navy just a few days before the Pearl Harbor attack.
A few days before.
And this guy's anti-war, but now he's joining the Navy.
Before there was even a need to.
Exactly. That's why I brought it up. I'm not saying anything, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
So Shriver would spend 5 years on active duty in the South Pacific. He'd actually got a Purple Heart for wounds at Guadalcanal, which means it's entirely possible that once upon a time he was on the same island as my grandfather. Interesting to me. Shriver then comes home from the war and becomes an editor at Newsweek. He meets Eunice Kennedy, the sister of his former high school buddy, at a party in New York. Shriver then gets hired to manage the Kennedys' Chicago business, which is called Merchandise Mart. And 7 years later, he would marry Eunice Kennedy, and they would have 5 kids, including Maria Shriver, who would become the wife of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And Merchandise Mart, just for you guys that don't know that, was very steeped in mafia connections with Chicago.
Which just, I don't know if we're going to get to that because, we've got Kennedy's involved and Chicago's involved. And we're going to talk about the 1960 election and how the mafia, threw the election in Illinois, and that's how Kennedy barely won, et cetera. Now they can get into the conspiracy theories about was the mafia involved in the Kennedy's assassination. Yeah, That's why you brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shriver's a devout Catholic and critical of abortion. He gets named to the Chicago Board of Education by Mayor Martin Kennelly. We've talked about Chicago machine politics. We're going to have to talk about it a little bit more today, but if anytime you see people on these boards in Chicago, you can probably assume they're involved in that slime, right?
Yes, you have to assume that.
He considered a run in 1966 for governor of Illinois after he's being recruited by none other than the corrupt, convicted Mayor Richard Daley.
Part of the Daley machine.
Yes. In 1960, Daley recruits him to run for governor again. He doesn't do it because the patriarch of the Kennedy clan, Joseph P. Kennedy, who made his money doing what?
Running liquor.
Bootlegging, yes, with the mafia. He forbid Sergeant Shriver from running for governor because he didn't want to impact JFK's presidential run in 1960, and the concern was having too many or oversaturation of Catholic candidates in Illinois could cost the Democrats. Remember, we'd never had I think JFK was the first Catholic president, right?
I think so.
Yeah, the Protestants' power in America weren't going to give that seat up easily. So instead, Shriver goes to work on the Kennedy election. He works for him, goes to a few states and does that stuff. Then when Kennedy becomes president, he's his brother-in-law. He gets a few jobs in the Kennedy administration, and one of them was to become the founder and the first director of the Peace Corps.
Which is very interesting.
Because
it eventually was used for, whether it was started for that, I don't know, but it was definitely infiltrated with the CIA.
Without a doubt. A lot of that in Africa and Southeast Asia.
Yes.
And it's a perfect cover for CIA too.
Yes, perfect.
And that's also the money laundering part of that's interesting too. So now you got Congress to earmark money for the Peace Corps because it's got this wonderful pure mission, and that money's never going to go down in value, and it just goes through NGOs and government organizations like the Peace Corps, goes out of the country where it can now be laundered to be used for certain activities.
Yes.
This is one of the earliest versions of that. So he stayed on with Peace Corps till 66. Kennedy gets assassinated, and LBJ keeps him on, asked him to stay. Some of the things he did for LBJ, he was created the Office of Economic Opportunity. He was the architect of LBJ's War on Poverty,
which destroyed the black family.
Thank you. It's exactly what it did. And he probably, like I say, Sergeant Shriver may have even meant well. But what LBJ knew with the War on Poverty to do, and that's the famous quote, because if we get this stuff passed, and I hate to say this on the air, but this is what LBJ was caught on tape saying, we'll have the niggers voting Democrat for a century. And as the Colonel just pointed out, the War on Poverty destroyed the black family in America. Some other quote-unquote social programs he founded was the Head Start program, which ruined education. VISTA, the Job Corps, which ruined jobs. Community Action, Upward Bound, Foster Grandparents, National Clearinghouse for Legal Services of Indian and Migrant Opportunities, and Neighborhood Health Services, which ruined healthcare. All of these 1960s programs ended up backfiring, and Shriver was at the head of all of them. Whether he meant well or not, they turned out terribly. He was active, and one thing he did good was he's active in the Special Olympics with his wife Eunice, and I think the Special Olympics is still a wonderful thing. So I'll give him credit for that. In 1964, Sergeant Shriver, he's had a pretty interesting life, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been very active.
Yeah. In 64, he was considered a finalist to be LBJ's vice president. LBJ ended up settling on Hubert Humphrey because they wanted the Midwest vote, I believe. They also tried to get him to run for governor again in Illinois in 1964. He did not. 68, they tried to get him to run for both either governor or Senate in Illinois. And this is Mayor Daley is the instigator of all this. He's trying to shuffle the pieces of the Chicago machine. At the time, Adlai Stevenson was one of the pretty big names in Democrat politics, and he's from Illinois. So what they were going to do is Daley wanted Stevenson to run for Senate and for Sergeant Shriver to run for governor. And they would have put the whole Democrat machine behind that. Unfortunately, Adlai Stevenson speaks out against the Vietnam War, and Daley pulls his support out from under him. Not sure why a mayor of Chicago would make that an issue, but. So instead of running for governor or senator, Sergeant Shriver then accepts LBJ's offer to become the ambassador to France from 1968 to 1970. Who was the president of France at that time?
Charles de Gaulle.
Did we try to kill him at all?
Over 20 times. So just prior to his arrival, after one of the attempts, because Lyman Lemonsker was the NATO commander at the time, in 1966, Charles de Gaulle kicks NATO out of Paris and they move to Brussels. And the move was done in 1967. I don't have off the top of my head the last attempt on his life, but I would venture to say it was right around that time when they moved NATO out.
When was the last of the Algerian, well, not the last of them, but there was an Algeria incident right at that time period too.
So,
which, to me, that's a very interesting data point.
Yeah. They were a French colony and they wanted their freedom. And Charles de Gaulle and JFK had agreed that they were going to be given their freedom. And that was one of the major justifications for the multiple attempts on Charles de Gaulle's life. And JFK received a lot of pushback on his support of giving Algeria their freedom. And so there was a huge war in Algeria, of which Otto Skorzeny and Operation Gladio played a prominent part of in sabotaging the peace process and the decolonization of Algeria. It became a huge stumbling block. They eventually got their freedom, but not without a bunch of people being murdered in the process.
Yeah, I figured you'd have a lot to add on how interesting it is that Sergeant Shriver then became the U.S. ambassador at that time period.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. He comes home in 1970. I guess that means Nixon kept him on for a little bit. 1972, McGovern was running for the Democrat ticket. He was considering Shriver to be his vice presidential candidate. Unfortunately, he couldn't reach Shriver at the time he was making the decision because Shriver was visiting Moscow, USSR. Yeah. So in 1976, he actually tried to get the Democratic presidential nomination himself. Obviously, he was beat out by Jimmy Carter. So during the 70s, he joins a law firm by the name of Fried, Frank, Harris, Shriver, and Jacobson. And that's a pretty important one. It was founded by a bunch of Jewish Germans. It was one of the law firms that recently spoke out against the anti-Semitism at the Ivy League schools with the pro-Palestine protest that we just saw. And what these law firms did, if you guys, just a reminder, is Jewish students were not being protected by these Ivy League schools. And so the law schools basically sent out notifications to the Ivy League schools say, look, you either stop this or we're not going to be considering graduates of your law schools in our prestigious firms. So that warning carried a lot of weight. So that is worth mentioning. Some of the things this law firm has been involved in. They were the ones who helped with the acquisition of the MetLife building for $1.7 billion, at the time the largest, most expensive building in the world. They helped Goldman Sachs open a bunch of private equity funds. Remember Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yeah.
And the FTX scam and the collapse?
Yeah.
Well, we knew the fix was in when the first law firm to get there was Sullivan and Cromwell. Well, the second law firm to get there was Fried Frank. He's the one that was hired by the CTO, Gary Wang. So they're still pretty important. Some fun alumni. One is a guy we all know from very recent stuff, a guy by the name of Jeffrey Berman.
Yeah.
He's a mixed bag to some people. I don't think so, but he's from the Southern District of New York. He's a guy who went after Rudy Giuliani for his activities in Ukraine. So that's politicized. Earlier in his career, he had helped prosecute some of the Iran-Contra people. He also prosecuted former CIA employee Thomas Clines for tax fraud. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Berman's also the guy who issued the search warrant for former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. Berman's the guy who charged Michael Avenatti. Berman's also the guy who charged Epstein in 2019. He's also the guy in 2019 who charged Lev Parmas, Igor Fruman, and 2 other Russians for influence peddling as part of the Russiagate. And then he gets fired by Bill Barr, and that was messy, but it's because he was trying to investigate Steve Bannon for his border wall financing scheme. So that's Jeffrey Berman from the same firm.
It also says that he filed at least one of the lawsuits against Maduro.
I missed that one.
Yeah. In 2020.
Okay, some other interesting alumni of that firm was Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, Elena Kagan. Harvey Pitt, Securities Exchange Commission, 2001 through 2003. Right on this, coming out of the Enron investigations, he's the chair of the SEC and all the cleanup going on there. But Pitt's interesting. I think you remember the other day, and I talked about Patrick Byrne worked with a former chair of the SEC to create Reg Show.
Yeah.
Which cut down on dark pool money and shorting stocks. That's Harvey Pitt.
Interesting.
Yeah, a little fun connection that I just accidentally know. There's a William Howard Taft IV, of course, part of the Skull and Bones Taft family, was an alumni.
Yeah.
And a guy by the name of Mark Zell, who's still around, because he's the chairman of the Republican Overseas Israel and VP of the Republicans Overseas Inc. Incorporated, which is an organization that works to keep Republicans overseas from having to pay taxes. They oppose the FATCA. So Zell's kind of important. It's interesting. Democrats overseas have a little bit different. They got a little bit better funding, and they actually have a primary, whereas the Republicans overseas do not. All right.
That's interesting.
So that's Shriver's law firm. After all these political offices he's held. In 1981, he gets appointed to the Rockefeller University Council. Because of course he does.
Because of course he does.
Devoted to research in biomedical and related sciences. And this is where the Rockefeller 2011 plan came from about COVID lockdown. He would die in 2011, so I'm not going to blame that one on Sergeant Shriver. But
he was a part of some very nefarious organizations.
Sure. Very influential, without a doubt. He definitely was at some parties with some people you'd want to wash your hands with after shaking their hands.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So that's it for Sergeant Shriver, but I think he definitely needs to be on our list of interesting Scroll and Key alumni. All right, our next one, Cyrus Vance.
Gosh.
Everyone here is going to be familiar with this name. Let's talk about Cyrus. Cyrus the Virus. Class of Yale Class 1939. Born in 1917 in Clarksburg, West Virginia. That's not a very good place to, be born with a silver spoon in your mouth, is it?
Not all of them were, but there's still a lot of money in some of those places, especially in that belt as far as families. I mean, like Frank Wisner, he was born in Mississippi and ended up in this but his family was wealthy. They were in the timber business in the Southern Pines. So there's a lot of money, even though it's pockets of money as opposed to an entire city of money in the Northeast.
It's well put. So Cyrus Vance's family moves to New York City when he was very young. His mother had come from a prominent Philadelphia family.
There you go.
He was born in 1917, but his father dies in 1922. So mom takes the whole family and moves to Switzerland. We're just starting to build a Swiss connection, but keep that data point in mind, people, please. Well, his uncle was a guy by the name of John W. Davis, who happened to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. This is the 1920s. John Davis would also become the 1924 U.S. presidential candidate. He would become Cyrus Vance's mentor and ended up adopting him. So he's born in West Virginia, but then ends up being the adopted son of a U.S. ambassador to England, who's obviously connected, and a guy who did run for president in 1924. So he did have a silver spoon.
Yep.
Goes to a private school called the Kent School. I'm not going to do the alumni of the Kent School. It wasn't that exciting. Goes to Yale, plays hockey. And he goes to Yale Law after being Scroll and Key. And some of his classmates at Yale Law that he would later work very closely with, Sergeant Shriver, William Scranton, Stanley Rogers Razor, that's R-E-S-O-R, and William Bundy. Cyrus, you're starting to get some connections here, buddy.
Yep.
World War II breaks out. He joined the Navy as a gunnery officer on a U.S. Hale and saw action in the Battle of Tarawa, Saipan, Battle of Guam, the Bougainville Campaign, and the Philippines Campaign. I saw no mention of any OSS activity. It seems to have been a pretty legitimate military career. So then he comes home from the war and joins a law firm by the name of Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett in New York City. This is the firm that represented, we've talked about this firm before because Thatcher was a Skull and Bones alumni. As a reminder, this is the firm that represented Google for their IPO and their YouTube purchase. They did the Tesla IPO. They did the Alibaba IPO. They helped Microsoft with the acquisitions of LinkedIn and GitHub.
Good grief.
It's a pretty big firm. But they got some fun alumni that we went over before, and I'll just do them again real quick. When we talked about Thatcher, again was a major in the American Red Cross, and he's our friend Dr. The Program has linked him through marriage to some families like the Browns, the Brown Brothers Harrimans, and the Auchinclosses. And then, of course, he's related to the Bundys, or at least linked. But some of the alumni of this law firm. Karina Gore, the daughter of Alan Tipper Gore. Deborah Archer, the president of the ACLU. Anna Maria Slaughter, who's the former director of policy planning at the U.S. State Department. We got a former VP of Goldman Sachs, and of course, none other than Lynn Forrester D. Rothschild.
Oh, good grief.
So that's one of those firms. That's where he joins after World War II. So Cyrus, he's rubbing elbows. 1957, then Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson recruits him to the U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Services. It is there where Cyrus Vance would help draft the act that created NASA. Kind of a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. But just shows you these people are in such influential places. And they could have picked any really smart kid or smart lawyer from anywhere in the country, but they don't. All right. 1961, U.S. Secretary of Defense McNamara recruits him to be the general counsel for the Department of Defense. What's the DOD do in 1961?
The Vietnam War.
Yep. JFK then makes him
I mean, that's when we murdered Patrice Lumumba and all that other stuff too. So
yeah,
we're about ready to coup Brazil in '63. Lots of stuff.
Cyrus is there. JFK makes him the Secretary of the Army, which is interesting because he's the guy who actually ordered the Army units to Mississippi during the integration protests. People should review the legal arguments behind that and apply it to what's going on in Minneapolis right now. It's an important story. But Cyrus Vance is the lawyer who made that decision. And Cyrus Vance is considered royalty in some Democrat circles, so that's something you need to hold them up to, because JFK certainly is royalty. In 1964, Cyrus Vance becomes the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and he sort of becomes LBJ's what's the word just when you see since the troubleshooter, the fixer. He becomes LBJ's fixer. So here's some of the places LBJ sends him. The Panama Canal Zone after the student riots. Sends him to Detroit during those riots. What's up with this Cyrus Vance and riots? That's 3 now. Does he have a specialty we don't know about? Considering what we now know about staged riots and protests, some following the Summer of Love, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And we know the CIA did the same in the 1960s. All right. He then gets sent to Cyprus to broker a peace deal between Greece and Turkey. We know how that worked out. Folks, it didn't. They're still arguing about it today. In 1968, LBJ sends him to South Korea to deal with the USS Pueblo hostage situation. When he's younger, he had supported, in the early 60s, he supported the Vietnam War, but changed his views and resigns his office after he advised withdrawal of U.S. troops. Later in life, he's resigned. He's named the deputy to W. Averill Harriman, Skull and Bones, during the Paris Peace Accords that was designed to end the Vietnam War. Those failed because of the duplicity of the South Vietnamese, but Cyrus Vance was there. Goes back to the private sector to work for Simpson and Thatcher, but keeps getting called back in to participate in diplomatic missions. Some of the places they sent him in as a special envoy to was, all right, don't laugh yet, Bosnia, Croatia, South Africa, Nagorno-Karabakh, which is that little tiny spot in the middle, right between Azerbaijan and Armenia, where everywhere this guy goes, it ends up being a shit show, right?
Yes.
I bet this guy went there trying to negotiate peace, but he wasn't very good at it, and they kept sending him. So he's so unsuccessful that 1977, Jimmy Carter says, this guy's got to be my Secretary of State. How'd that work out? Well, He's the guy that did the Panama Canal treaties that we're now trying to reverse.
Well, technically, he didn't. I have a big beef with this Panama Canal Treaty story. That Panama Canal Treaty story was signed within a couple of months of, like, in the same year that Jimmy Carter took office. It had been being discussed since it went through Johnson started it. It went through Nixon administration. It went to the Ford administration. And then it was finally signed in the first year of the Jimmy Carter administration. They didn't do a lot of work on it. It had basically all been hammered out.
Well, so, Vance would have been in a position working for LBJ to know about it and be part of it beforehand. So
that's true. He could have been, but I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. It also goes to show you that Nixon's foreign policy the first 4 years were not that different than his predecessors.
No, that's why it doesn't matter what party's in charge. They all stay the same.
Just about. We know the exceptions because they either get shot or impeached.
Yeah.
He was in Rhodesia when that turned out really badly. If you were white in Rhodesia, a lot of murders. He was in Namibia in Africa. With a little resource exploitation. He was over in South Africa. He was involved in that debacle when Mandela was being jailed. Cyrus Vance is the guy who set up the Camp David Accords, which failed to give us peace in the Middle East. Here's where it gets fun with him. It's where I say the black hat, white hat. He was always pushing for detente with the USSR. And the National Security Advisor, who's probably the second most important diplomat, was a guy by the name of Brzezinski. And these two did not see things eye to eye. Brzezinski was a hawk, and Cyrus Vance was a dove. He wanted to make friends with everybody.
Or maybe that was an act.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. Let's see. So the SALT II talks were done when he was Secretary of State. He successfully lobbies for normalization relations with the People's Republic of China. This is in 1977. This is right after the Rockefellers had sent their minions in to open up China and implement this global environmental climate change hoax way of getting to the one world government. Cyrus Vance is trying to work with the Chinese because they're our friends. And for those who don't know, I'm a China hawk. I do not believe that they're working towards some people put a sovereign alliance. I just don't trust a company that propagandized COVID and showed you people falling down on the streets, which didn't happen, and to make us more scared of COVID. I do not trust them at all. So anybody involved with furthering our relationship with China, I consider suspect. Fair enough?
Yeah.
This whole time, Brzezinski continues to step on his toes. They are very divided on how to support the Shah of Iran. Vance argues for reforms. Brzezinski wants the Shah to crack down, the iron fist approach. Carter's so indecisive, the Shah's got no idea what to do, and he ends up fleeing in 1979. And a lot of that had to do with the different advice he's getting between Vance and Brzezinski. And that led straight to where we are with Iran today. The SALT II treaty is finally signed between Carter and Brezhnev of the USSR. That's nuclear arms reductions, but the Senate never ratified it. So that's a failure. After the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, Vance, who's been trying to make nice with the Soviets, kind of sees his stature reduced. It's like, okay, you've given us this advice and it doesn't work out too well. You're saying the Russians can be trusted and the Soviets end up, invading Afghanistan.
They were baited in, though.
Sure.
By the CIA.
Which means Brzezinski probably knew something about it.
Yep.
So then Cyrus...
Just to the point, it was to derail any initiatives to have detente with the Soviet Union.
Sure. Pretty hard to negotiate when you're supplying arms to somebody shooting at the guy.
Yeah.
So then we have the Iran hostage crisis. And Vance's idea, the Secretary of State, is to negotiate an end to it through the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. This fails badly. You can't work with the PLO at that time period, I don't think. Vance was trying to resist military solutions to the hostage crisis. Brzezinski wanted to go in all guns blazing. Vance's stature is reduced, so guess who's going to win? Well, what happens is Vance leaves Washington, D.C. for a weekend to go to Florida because he's recovering from a gout attack. Second he does that, the National Security Council meets the next day. The Deputy Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, attends in Vance's place and never tells Cyrus Vance about the plan, and that plan was Operation Eagle Claw. That's when that got authorized. They did it when Cyrus Vance was out of town with gout. When Vance finds out about it, he resigns as Secretary of State in fury. And as we all know, Operation Eagle Claw was aborted by Carter when only 5 of the 8 helicopters arrived in operational condition. Warren Christopher, the Deputy Secretary of State, would then somehow manage for the hostages to be released on Ronald Reagan's day he was inaugurated. You have any thoughts on Operation Eagle Claw you want to share?
I mean, there's a lot. I could talk for 30 minutes just on that.
I figured. Well,
the whole thing was a disaster, and the it wasn't actually. I mean, it failed. It wasn't. It wasn't called off. I mean, they executed it. It was a very poorly planned operation. It had a threshold to be no-go. And when they met that threshold where they should have canceled it, they didn't. And it ended up in an unmitigated disaster. People were killed. So, yes. Yeah.
Almost like it was designed to fail.
I would argue it was definitely designed to fail to make Jimmy Carter, because the part you leave out is that Jimmy Carter, that October when he entered office, fired almost the entire covert element of the CIA. And the rest of his administration was set up by the CIA and the National Security Council to thwart anything and everything that he did. He was the only president that tied aid to whether or not you actually had a democracy. I'm not a Jimmy Carter fan, but I'm also a realist and understanding he did basically what Trump did by closing USAID. He cut off all funding that the CIA was money laundering through USAID to the dictators that they had put in charge of countries through Operation Condor. When he did that, the CIA was pissed. On top of him having fired the entire covert operation, over 800 of them in the field, out. So they go to Kenya and set up the Safari Club in order to operate, they being George H.W. Bush, because Jimmy Carter said that he didn't want to continue him as the CIA director. So he sets his own entity up to house the 800 fired CIA officers using their covert funding and from drugs, and then orchestrates all of these calamities throughout the Carter administration in order to dirty him up. It is my opinion that that's exactly what happened in Iran with the fall of the Shah, and the operation that we're talking about should have never happened. They did not have the capability to do the mission once it got to the point where they had already lost a few of the helicopters, and they went ahead with it because they wanted it to fail.
Yep, that's really close to how I read that history.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the end of Cyrus Vance as Secretary of State, but not the end of his diplomatic career. In 1991, he becomes a special envoy for the Secretary General of the United Nations to negotiate a solution for the conflict in Croatia. They put together what's called the Zagreb Four Group, and the plan fails when Croatia breaks the peace and retook the Krajina region. And we know how that all ended up. Then in 93, he becomes a special envoy to the United Nations for Bosnia. And Cyrus Vance's plan for peace is rejected again. His batting average is getting really low, right?
Because in each of those two things you just mentioned, the CIA is on the ground destroying those countries with their mujahideen retrainees into the Muslim population.
In 1997, he becomes the honorary chairman and the original honorary chair of the American-Iranian Council. And they were in the news in Trump 1.0 and a little bit during Biden when we had a bunch of Iranian spies being actually caught.
Yes.
So what did he do after, well, let's see, what do you do when you're Cyrus Vance and you no longer want to practice law and you're no longer going to be a diplomat? You sit on the boards of directors of some interesting organizations. How about this? IBM, Pan American Airlines, yeah, CIA, manufacturers Hanover Trust, U.S. Steel, the New York Times.
Good God.
He becomes a trustee of the Yale Corporation. He becomes a vice chairman of the Council of Foreign Relations, and of course the chairman of the board of the Rockefeller Foundation. Think this guy's been just about everywhere?
Yes.
That is Cyrus Vance, people. He would die in New York at the age of 84, but we're not done with him because he had 5 children, one of whom we should all know and love, named Cyrus Vance Jr. Cyrus Vance Jr. goes to the Buckley and Groton School.
Good grief.
Yeah. Goes to Yale. I saw no mention of him in Skull and Bones or Scroll and Key. Don't know why. I think he would have been just barely old enough to have been on the lists. I couldn't find it. He then goes to Georgetown Law. Comes back and eventually runs for Attorney General of New York County District after Robert Morgenthau retires. This is Cyrus Vance Jr. He was endorsed by a bunch of Democrat bigwigs in New York. Mayor David Dinkins, corrupt. Gloria Steinem, Caroline Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy Jr., many other local Democrat office holders, every major newspaper, including the New York Times, New York Daily News, New York Post, and the New York Amsterdam News. And he comes in there and he promises to run the basically New York Attorney General's office. It's the county, but that's the one that matters. This is a direct quote. He called it a community-based justice system. And we all know what that means.
Yep.
And how's New York done since? Well, this is just after Giuliani's already cleaned up New York and crime had gone down. Well, that's going to be reversed with his community-based justice system, isn't it?
Yep.
But Cyrus Vance Jr. wins that election with 91% of the New Yorkers vote. That's hard to do. So let's see why we should all know his name. 2009, he's involved in what's called the Abacus Federal Savings Bank prosecution. This is a Chinese American bank, family bank. It had self-reported a former employee that they'd been guilty of mortgage fraud. Vance's office goes in there, charges the whole bank with mortgage fraud, does this huge showcase arrests of all their officers, put them all in handcuffs and handcuff them to each other for mortgage fraud. Got this big press conference. And then 5 years and $10 million of taxpayer dollars later, they were all found not guilty on all 80 charges. So you think we might have a political prosecutor, right? Fair enough.
Yep.
2011, one of his prosecutors would argue on behalf of none other than Jeffrey Epstein, asking for Epstein's sex offender status to be reduced. And I want to switch over here to Wikipedia real quick for that. So hang on a second. I better have that up, because this is really remarkable. Okay, I'm just going to read a paragraph. In 2011, a New York prosecutor from Vance's office argued on behalf of billionaire and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to New York Supreme Court Judge Ruth Pickholz, asking Epstein's sex offender status to be reduced. The reasoning was that Epstein had not been indicted and his underage victims had failed to cooperate in the case. Pickholz, however, denied the petition and expressed bewilderment that a New York prosecutor would make such a request on behalf of a serial sex offender accused of molesting multiple girls. In quotes from the judge, "I have to tell you, I'm a little overwhelmed because I have never seen a prosecutor's office do anything like this. I've done so many sex offender registration hearings, much less troubling than this one, where the prosecutor would never make a downward argument like this." Jennifer Gaffney, then deputy chief of Vance's sex crime unit, stated at the hearing that there is only an indictment for one victim. If an offender is not indicted for an offense, it is strong evidence that the offense did not occur. Everyone warning about not getting the Epstein files and stuff like that, at least half of them are sitting in New York, gathering moss, being covered up by operators like Cyrus Vance Jr. Fair enough?
Yes.
Epstein had political connections, big time. So that's a failure. That's two big failures for him. Then there was the Dominic Strauss-Kahn, DSK is known as, the sexual assault case. Dominic Strauss-Kahn was the French head of the International Monetary Fund. The charges were that he demanded oral sex from a maid. The maid, DSK, said that it was consensual, and Cyrus Vance Jr. dismisses the charges. Remember that one in the headlines, people? That was Cyrus Vance Jr. covering up for the French head of the International Monetary Fund. Kind of a big deal.
Wow.
Just getting started. 2019, Paul Manafort, who's already been convicted, Vance Jr. comes back and files 16 indictments charging Manafort with mortgage fraud. And for those who don't know, Manafort may not have been a good guy or an honest operator, but he most certainly was set up to hurt Donald Trump by Ukrainian operators that created a Manafort document. The Black Ledger was done by corrupt Ukrainians, and that's how Manafort, and it was done to hurt Trump. Vance Jr. then turns around and tries to go after him for the charges are dismissed to double jeopardy. Charge him a second time. Cyrus Vance Jr., people. And I'm bringing this up, even though it has nothing to do with Scroll and Key, because his dad was, but mostly because he just got out of office, and he's young enough. The Democrats are going to put him in our lives again at some point.
Yep.
Guarantee we have not heard the last of Cyrus Vance Jr. All right, then he's involved in the Harvey Weinstein case. Oh, yeah. Allegations of political favoritism, campaign contributions, they're flying everywhere. So bad that in 2018, Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo announces he's going to have the state attorney general investigate Vance's office's handling of the Weinstein accusations, which pretty much means that he was sweeping them under the rug too. So Vance Jr.'s got a thing for pedophiles or rapists or whatever you want to call them.
A soft spot.
Yeah. And this is despite video evidence of Weinstein doing some of the things he's accused of. Vance claimed the case would not be provable. Of course, Cyrus Vance Jr.'s office is involved in a lot of things that happened attacking Donald Trump. He was behind the Stormy Daniels case, even though his office also charged, I believe, Avenatti. So that's strange. He's the guy who subpoenaed Trump's accounting firm, Mazars. All that investigative work, he would then pass along and that would become the case to his successor, Alvin Bragg. Cyrus Vance Jr., people. And we have not heard the last of him.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. With a dad like that, with connections like that, I mean, the guy's 100% politically connected his entire life. And you want to know why you get dirty prosecutors and dirty judges? I mean, they're still there. They're embedded like ticks. There's an entire network of them. They all know each other. They're all playing the same dirty game.
Yep.
Well, that's all I have for the 1930s. Fun show?
That was crazy.
Yeah. I still like the first guy best because of the hump. You know.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
It definitely shows the hidden network behind not only old operations, but current operations. Because unfortunately, these people were allowed to have children.
That's funny. There, Sarge asked in chat, what about the Mondami team? Yeah, they're the same political machine that and you've seen, and you can see it's the same political machine that runs these places. We've done the Chicago political machine. We've done New York. We know about the Buffalo Mafia, all this stuff. It's all these cities. They're all blue. They're all socialist. They're all corrupt. But
to Mayor Sarge's point, Mondavi's dad was brought over here on a CIA-funded scholarship.
Yeah. And you wonder why the CIA has done nothing, and the FBI, but done nothing but try to undermine the Trump administration. Because he's the one of the few presidents we've ever had who does not support their foreign policy, which apparently is one world government.
Correct.
And we have so many actors today that were all part of that 75-year attempt, to execute this one world government, which some people think Trump may have just dismantled over there in the Davos context.
Well, once again, he definitely announced that it was dead.
Yeah. I gotta go back this weekend. I'm gonna go back and watch that speech again because there was too much there to get the first time around, and I've been busy all week. But once again, Davos is in where? Switzerland. That connection's going to come up huge going forward. We haven't done it. It hasn't yet as big as it could have. We've got it with the banking and all that, but there's going to be a lot more Switzerland coming.
Well, and it was not coincidental that is where Allen Dulles was during World War I and World War II.
No, not at all. And, people, I've heard people say, wasn't Switzerland just up there with like Denmark and Norway? No, Switzerland's right smack dab in the middle, so it's perfect for cross-border money, cash transfers.
Yeah, that's why I drove through Switzerland when I went to the Netherlands from Italy. I know exactly where it's at.
I heard it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah. And Swiss people are impeccably polite. Or some.
They just have more than their fair share of evil organizations that have taken root in Switzerland under the auspices of them being neutral.
Yeah, that's the auspices. It's more of it's a shield. It's what they hide. It's what they used to hide behind.
Yes.
I'm struggling to figure out what I'm going to call this show on my channel with this chapter. There's a few things it could be, but I'll have to come up with something creative here in the next couple hours when I post it.
Call it the hump.
Yeah, but I want to get the titles. I have to get somebody who hasn't watched us to want to click on it. Yeah. People that have watched our shows, they're going to go ahead and click. We got some pretty loyal watchers, but I got to come up with something that'll grab someone's attention. So, if you have any ideas, people DM me on X, please, for this episode. And with that, we're at 90 minutes.
All right, great job as usual.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Well, I told you were going to be doing a lot of talking. A lot of the stuff just goes right into your wheelhouse. So,
yep.
And it's funny. That just ties, how we ended up starting to do shows together because you were studying one angle, I'm studying another, and boy, they kept intersecting.
Yes, they do, over and over again.
Intersections. Maybe that's today.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.